For the bass player in the rhythm section, on kind of Dukish, this is a good example of learning how to build your bass lines throughout the trio form. This is a good exercise. Checking out Chris Cranshaw's transcription, and after you nail this part, you should be able to start learning how to melodically play bass lines throughout this form. Something bass players should always think about is, I know you're always playing root 1 and 5. In this particular piece, kind of Dukish, is a good practice to try to create melodies and play around with the rhythm section and learn how to build the form from the beginning towards the end of the trio part.
What do you mean by that, create melodies?
Creating melodies.
Give me an example of what you're talking about.
An example, well, I could say one thing, even though it's not the same era, if you think about Israel Crosby as a bass player throughout this, I'll give you an example. This is an example of building a melodic bass line through kind of Dukish.
Okay, give me an example, Carlos. Show me the one that's not melodic and then the one that is melodic.
This is a non-melodic bass line. This is a melodic bass line through the same form. Well, since this is a transcription, I think it's already going to be pre-planned, right? So planned already. So I guess as a rhythm section player, you should always listen to what's coming and wait and hear for ideas so that you could kind of add to your arsenal. You know, it gets to a point where as a bass player, you should always be checking out the piano player and trying to get ideas from his playing so that you could add to your playing. Space is always great. You also got to understand that you're the bass player and you're inside of a rhythm section, which is a function, and you also got to keep time, so you can't take away from that too.
So the drums, one thing that's interesting about the drum part on this, again, Chris Crenshaw transcribed note for note what Sam Woodyard plays on the recording, and it's brilliant playing. But I think what Sam Woodyard is doing is basically the Joe Jones hi-hat language, which, we're talking about the hi-hat being invented around the late 20s, early 30s, and the first real master of the hi-hat, and still really the grand master of the hi-hat is Joe Jones, who played with Count Basie's orchestra and influenced everybody. And this kind of open, closed style of hi-hat playing really comes from him. I think it's possible that Chick Webb might have recorded it before Joe Jones recorded it, maybe a year or two before, but they were probably both doing it at the same time. Maybe they influenced each other. But it's a really great style of hi-hat playing. It helps to have, I think, to have thinner hi-hats. These ones that I'm using today, the top cymbal is very, very thin, and it gives it a little more of this sort of trashy, sloshy sound in the open sound. This open sound has more overtones and more kind of like shh happening in it, so it's a little more shh. And another thing that Joe Jones did and that Sam Woodyard does on this, that all the great swing drummers did, is they would play on the stand of the hi-hat, believe it or not, the hi-hat stand with their left hands, they would play accents on 2 and 4 on the rod of the hi-hat stand. There are recordings that you hear from the swing era. Now, hi-hat stands in those days were lighter, and the metal was sort of thinner. And actually, this is a little bit of a clunky sound, but I don't know. There isn't really anything here. But you sometimes hear on swing recordings this almost like this high-pitched pinging sound, almost like a triangle or something. And that's the drummer playing with his left hand on the hi-hat, the rod of the hi-hat stand, while he's playing with his right hand on the hi-hat. It's a very, very hip style, and everybody should check it out.
Okay, sometimes you play like we just played, and it's sad, and that's all right. Because sometimes stuff has to be said before it's good. Okay, this is a piece we know, we've played a lot of times, we're gonna get better. And it's, you know, part of what makes jazz hard to play is that it catches fire sometimes, and sometimes it doesn't. Okay, this is a very difficult piece to play. Why? It goes through three or four different eras. First, it's like New Orleans music. It's like a clarinet line of high society or a march, orchestrated out for the big band. It's in a tight two group. It's almost like post ragtime music. So that takes one feeling. Why it's all very 1 and 3 oriented. The tendency when you have 1 and 3 music is it's going to drag, because people used to go on 1, 2, 3, 4, and now you have to go, and that's different. So then when you get to letter B, that cannot be violent enough for the current era. 1930, 31, it was great. What's the year of this? 31? 30? When is Rockin' and Rhythm? Anybody know the exact year?
Originally, I think it was 31, but this is 50.
Yeah, but you know, the beginning is the same as what it was. This is not different material. So what would that be? Okay, I'm gonna make sure I'm right with my years. In 1931, still a lot of people playing downbeat-oriented music. By the time of this arrangement, which is 1963, almost nobody playing downbeat-oriented music. Everything they're playing is 2 and 4. Okay, so now we have this call and response, letter B. The saxophone section led by the clarinet. Ya, beep, beep, boop. Trombones answer and the trumpets answer every 2 beats. These things have got to have a lot of personality in them. The tendency right here is it's deep, beep, all these slides got to have something in them. We go back to see now he's taking it from a kind of ragtime to a jazz. Why? It starts with a syncopation. So from going downbeat, now we syncopate it. So this rhythm is going to come back time and time again in this arrangement. Then we get the trombone bridge, another sign of Duke's intelligence. He's always bringing that thematic material back. Okay, now we get to the section at D. It's more raucous. The trumpets are playing. He's combining doopy 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 doodly dilly dop and doopy 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 doop, and it becomes dilly da dop, but dilly da dop. So he takes the A part of that theme and makes it the B part. He takes the end of the first saxophone theme and makes it the beginning of the riff. It's played by the brass section at letter D. The saxes are playing a bottom riff. Now this is a part you can overlook. Let's listen to these 2 parts, and we get a sense of the first time Duke gets actual diversity in this arrangement. Let's hear the saxophone section with the rhythm section at letter D. Now what makes this part hard is the saxophones are playing 1, 2, 3, 4. They're really on downbeats. So if they drag or they don't hit 4 with the rhythm section, it's gonna start to drag down. Let's go from letter D. Give me that. Letter D. Just give me more of that. Give me more of that. Just a little more hump on that 4. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. How did they do it? So the accent is pero. That's it. Okay. All right. So I was wrong, but pero. Okay. Let's try that one more time with the sax and the rhythm section. Go ahead. I'm edging it up, man. Go ahead. Let's hear the brass now.
Chris. Yes, sir. Fourth bar.
fourth bar B, I have an A concert.
You playing, okay, I'm hearing it wrong, but we're half step, we're not together anymore. Right? You play, you were,
First over the fourth bar?
first, no, the fourth part.
Yeah, I have an A concert.
Yeah, he has the
And I have E flat concert against
Yep.
it?
Yep.
Okay, okay. But the rest of the lines are unison?
Yep. Yeah, that's it. Johnny Ives is the only one that breaks off like that.
He might have just been doing it.
I love it.
Yeah, he might. Yeah, what did Jimmy Hamilton say? Duke say personalize your part. He didn't want to hear the same music every night. I don't know, y'all think this is a concerto or something. This is Duke Ellington's music. Right, yeah, do they thing. Okay, now let's hear the brass. On this last time we were playing it, we were rushing or something was kind of off in our rhythm. So let's get to, we got to make sure we really get uniform in the acceptance of wherever the lead is playing the time. Okay, and we have to make sure we line this up. 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, All right, let's put the two parts together so we see how they work. Now we're gonna do this without Vince on the trombone hollering between everything. We know how Duke likes to do this, use these kind of holler parts to create even more mayhem and human havoc. So he's free to just do that, but he has to fit it in gaps he puts it in the breaks of the ensemble part. Once again, it's not just a random solo. So let's put the two parts together, letter D. 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, Okay, so now in between that, some kind of hand waving. Now we're going into a whole different thing. So the sanctified person, or the person that's co-signing what you play. Now we have the entire ensemble play the introduction, led by the trombones, 4 before F. This is also a difficult rhythm to play. The tendency to go dee 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 or dee 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 dee, and you have to find the right lilt on this rhythm. Once again, it's a downbeat oriented rhythm. Dee 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 la ba da ba da ba da ba da ba da load up. You work on the feel of this, because if this doesn't feel right, the arrangement is not going to be right. Now we go into a section that's like a jungle section. Duke used to play this style they will call the jungle style. Characteristics of it: growling horns, tom-toms, offbeat rhythm, da ga ga da 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 ga ga da da boom doom doom doo ga doom doom. This is the kind of classic version of what would be called the jungle style. The trombones playing down with the bass, and the trumpets playing in unison. As much as we can get growls and all these different things, we do that. We create the feeling of that. Then the clarinet comes up on top of that. Now we heard the trombone play a solo. Now we're hearing the clarinet play a different type of solo. This solo should be wild. It's in the upper register, and it's underneath something. It has should have a lot of kind of just of that vibration. It shouldn't be like a nice clarinet part. It's got to be like something you just captured that wants to be free. Okay, and it's got to have that kind of grip and feeling, the urgency, and it's got to have a kind of a wild feeling to it. Now we come to the throat. I like to call this the throat section because this is before we get to the last shout section. And that's when the trombone comes back, howling and playing the solo through this whole thing, and the saxophones play a riff. Now we're marching down into the swing era. The piano's playing off beats. Now we go back, Duke goes back to his original style. I love this section at L to the end more than anything, because he brings in the whole kind of New Orleans sound of King Oliver and all the early people playing with those plunger mutes, and he invented that kind of way of playing in a pep section with the 3 horns. He has them growling, he has the saxophones playing a riff. So you have 2 things that are the same thing being played. The brass have one part, changing it slightly. Those things have to be very vocal and very, very aggressive from a physical standpoint. It's hard to be heard, 4th trumpet, 4th, 2nd trumpet, and 2nd trombone. We got to be aggressive. The saxophones on the bottom playing their riff. they're playing an inverse of what the trombones play. Boom, boom, ba-dum, boom, ba-dum, boom, ba-dum. Now the saxophone's dum, bum, ba-de-ba-da-da, ba-do-ba-dum. Instead of being dum, ba-dum, it's ba-do-ba-dum. So he takes a kind of thematic kernel, like what we heard Miles do in his composition, and he flips it around, and it becomes the saxophone theme at letter L. It creates a different feeling. All this builds up, and the pep section plays. Difficult part at letter O. This is one of the hardest parts to play because everything is downbeat oriented. If you look at that part, it's always good for the fourth trumpet to listen to the bass. And when you get to O, the bass is playing quarter notes. You play those quarter notes in the same time as the bass. Saxophone's all downbeat. Da ba da ba da ba da ba da ba da. Bidi bidi bidi. Pep section wah 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 wah. Bass doom 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 doom. Piano boom 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 boom. Drums doom 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 doom. It's all very lined up on the downbeat. Unusual for a jazz band to play a section with no offbeat syncopation. This goes on for this entire time from O all the way till we get to 4 bars before Q. Then the saxophones start to syncopate a little bit. We see Duke bring the same themes back at R that the saxes were playing, except now the whole ensemble plays it. Dee, 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 dee. Whereas before the saxophones dee, the trombones da, boom, ba-dum, becomes dee, 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 ba. It's the same thematic material, now voiced out for the ensemble. First trumpet comes in, it's like a ray of sunshine. Okay, we had the clarinet in upper register, we had the 2 trombones shouting, shout choruses, shouting between the solos and the trombone solo. Now at the end, here comes first trumpet, mayhem and havoc in the high register. That's all it is. It's a voice. Okay, get as close as you can to these notes. You don't have to play the same thing Cat Anderson was playing, or you don't have to play the same thing, but you do have to get up there and create havoc. It's just a shout part over a syncopated part. Now we go back to the beginning. Do beep, boopity do, boo beep, boopity do beep, boopity dip, boopity lop. Thematic material we heard in the very beginning of the song. And then as we go on, it's got to get wild, and we got to break loose. Now we're hoping we could get to more of it in the beginning, but the arrangement is designed to build up to absolute mayhem. And it's very organized, but we have to play with a lot of personality and control, and it's all based on the ability to play downbeats and play in a strict time. Okay? And it's all the little acts of citizenship. We're talking about what the music can teach you, and we were talking about that yesterday. The greatest thing the music can teach you in this time is collegiality without being superficial. Because the more things mean to you, the more you're going to fight and argue over them. So you need a very serious governor on your understanding of what being in a group means. And if you're a leader of a group or a band director, it's even worse. Because the more leadership you have, the more space you have to create. If you have leadership and you're not creating space, it's not democratic. And it's something that our nation struggles with. We want to talk about the ideology of it, but we don't want to live it because the people who have stuff don't want to sacrifice it. They want to sacrifice something that's so meaningless that it's like, it's not a real sacrifice. You can get a trophy for it, but it does not create real change. Our music is designed so that the person who sits in the back is the drummer, that's actually the leader of the band. And the way we work as an ensemble, we all have different talents. Chris transcribes the music. He knows the music better than we know it. He definitely knows it better than me. I'm standing in the front. Victor was his teacher. But what does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, really. He learned some stuff from him. But we're playing this music. He gives us our best chance. Carlos has a specific body of knowledge he knows. My job is to create space for everybody's greatness to come through and to learn from them as whatever they learn from me. Ted, for those of us, we all naturally fall into age systems. And all that is a part of this music because as Duke got older, he made different decisions. When we found that our orchestra was old members who had played in Duke Ellington's orchestra from 1954, 55 to his death in 74. And the whole way they communicate to us of how to play this music was always natural. It was always very matter of fact. Doesn't mean they didn't fight. They didn't do things that we all do. It just means that when they came to playing the music, they had an understanding of how our way of living exists in our music. And if we aren't teaching this to our kids, we aren't teaching them anything. Because it's not that difficult to play a part accurately. It's hard to get the feeling and the intention and to do it with other people and to change parts, to elevate parts, and do all the things that we try to do.
In this piece, and most pieces where the clarinets are going to be playing with the jazz ensemble, the first thing you can do to give you a chance to succeed is change your clarinet barrel, because the jazz band plays a little higher than you would on regular pieces. So if you can get a shorter barrel, that will give you a bit of an edge to get inside the pitch category. And then try not to compete with the band, because you can only play so loud on the clarinet. The more you play loud, the flatter you're going to get. So you have to remember not to overplay the clarinet. But beyond that, in playing the music, in this piece, try to play the shapes of it specifically. There's some challenging pieces like the sixth measure of letter A. You're moving around with the left hand, that's kind of awkward. Try to articulate all the notes, but most of all, try to play the shape of the notes that's taking place and catch the peaks and the valleys of what's taking place and the accents of it. Work on the repetitive notes. You know, you have to work on being able to articulate those. They're not things that we do every day, but there's things we ought to work on being able to do every day. So this piece is really like a technical exercise of all the things you need to know on the clarinet in New Orleans music and beyond.
Anybody?
One of the hardest things about playing with a clarinet lead is that you need to play up to the clarinet, but you need to be able to hear the clarinet. And you know, it's easier for me sitting in the middle of the section to hear the clarinet, but it's harder for the other tenor and the baritone, the way it's set up, to hear where the clarinet lead is. You know, it's always that thing like your parents may tell you. You know, if you want to hear me say something or tell you something, you actually hear it. You know, if you want to hear somebody talk, you actually will try to listen. So shoot for listening for the clarinet when you play. Now, our dynamics are written as forte at letter A, but that's not where we're going to play. We're going to play at a volume where we can play up to where the clarinet is, because we realize the clarinet is in the middle of the horn. And it's not going to project a whole lot. So we play up to it and play with a lot of rhythm, and really try to listen to where they are and try to catch the inflections and things that they do, because they need to be musical when they play their part. And we always should follow the lead.
As far as this particular transcription, there's a lot more of the blues inside the parts. So as much as you can find that, bring that out. Particularly letter R I'm looking at. There's a section where it kind of reminds me of Gone that we do here in the Jazz League Center Orchestra. Miles Davis, Gil Evans from Porgy and Bess. There's a section in there where the woodwinds are playing a chord that's similar to the blues, and there's a chord that the brass play that's more vanilla. And if you look at letter R, the trombones and brass have what we call we have the major chord, and then the saxophones have the blues. Particularly Reed 4, he has the concert F sharp or the concert G flat, and Paul Gonsalves plays that plain as day. So as much as you can bring that out, saxophones, that chord that you have, the better. That is really going to get that vibe that we spoke about earlier. So if you find the blues in there, embrace it.
So we were just mentioning also, like with Harlem Airshaft, about how, especially with Duke Ellington's music, at any point anyone within the ensemble could end up being lead. And in this tune, that's particularly apparent for the fourth trumpet part, which, especially in a lot of high school ensembles, may not be the person with the strongest chops in the trumpet section. But from L through Q, you've got to play lead trumpet in a difficult register with a lot of power for a considerably long period of time. It can be a challenge, especially in young ensembles. One of the things for fourth trumpet players that play this to be aware of is the importance of the aggressiveness of their time within that pep section. Even if you're playing the right notes, if you're not on top of the time and leading the pep ensemble with your time, it's not going to be able to have the right sort of intent for that section. So for young musicians, especially that are playing this part, they're dealing with this part, you have to deal with it from a chop perspective, but you have to also deal with it from a time perspective and an aggressiveness of your approach that's going to be able to lead the ensemble forward through that.
So at letter R, because the lead trumpet player is playing all the scream stuff before that, what we did is have someone cover his part at R, from R to T, and also 6 from the end, the high Ds. So he or she doesn't have to play that whole time.
As far as the drums are concerned, the two biggest challenges for me on this chart are as we were talking about before, keeping the tempo up, keeping the drums swinging and urgent, but not letting it rush, not letting it actually speed up. And then the other big challenge is just the orchestration of the dynamics, because there's this very, very long build from J basically up to Q, and the drums aren't really playing loud. They're not supposed to be really screaming until maybe 4 before Q, setting up that big, crash on beat 2 before Q. So you have to really think about how you're going to play on the drums and keep it really cooking, but not really get loud. It's supposed to very slowly build as the sections kind of build on each other, and you have to really think about that. I think it helps to have at least two different cymbals that both you can ride on. Because I have this cymbal that is like a crash and also a light ride that I'm playing until about, I think I switch to the big ride around N or M, something like that. I think it's good to have that sort of contrast that helps, going to a bigger cymbal helps build it without necessarily having to play louder. It's an automatic build.